Jake Reynolds jogged the same path through Riverside Park every morning, his earbuds pumping low-tempo indie rock as his thoughts drifted far from the city skyline. He wasn't expecting the sudden jolt that came when his foot caught on something soft. He stumbled, barely managing to stay upright, and yanked out an earbud as he turned. To his surprise, it wasn't a rock or root, it was a golden retriever, lying calmly beside a man on a bench. The dog looked up with big, gentle eyes and let out a quiet woof, tail thumping lazily. "Max," the man murmured without opening his eyes. "You all right?" Jake knelt down, brushing dust off his hands. "I didn't see him, sorry," he said. The man sat up slowly, revealing a weathered face partially hidden beneath a scruffy beard and military-issue jacket. "No harm done," he said, his voice low but kind. "Max has got a habit of stretching out too far." The man introduced himself as Walter, a Vietnam veteran who'd been homeless for the better part of 2 decades, and Max as his loyal companion. Something about Walter's voice, calm, steady, laced with old pain, made Jake stay longer than planned. He offered coffee from his thermos, and they talked. Jake found himself drawn to this man who had seen hell and yet held no bitterness in his tone. Walter spoke little of the war but shared pieces of his past, his lost home, the wife who died of cancer, the daughter he hadn't seen in years. Max lay between them like a living bridge, occasionally nosing Jake's hand. Over the next few mornings, Jake returned. Each time, Walter was there, same bench, same dog, same quiet dignity. Jake, a successful analyst with no real family to speak of, began to feel something new during those morning chats, something grounding. But everything changed the day Max suddenly bolted mid-conversation, running across the park without warning. "Max!" Walter called after him, worry etched deep into his face. Jake didn't hesitate. Without thinking, he chased after the dog, unaware that Max wasn't just running, he was leading. And where he led would uncover a buried secret that would shake Jake's understanding of his family and himself forever. Jake sprinted after Max, dodging startled parkgoers and weaving between benches as the dog ran with an urgent, almost intentional determination. Max wasn't panicked, he was focused. Jake kept up, breath ragged, until Max veered off the path and disappeared down a narrow alley between an abandoned church and a boarded-up community center. The dog stopped beside a pile of old cardboard boxes and trash bags, pawing insistently at something half buried beneath the rubble. Jake, heart pounding, dropped to his knees and helped pull the debris aside. What emerged was a rusted metal box, dented but still sealed. Max whimpered and nudged it toward him. Curiosity piqued, Jake opened it, revealing a collection of weathered personal items, war medals, handwritten letters, and faded photographs. One photo made his breath catch in his throat. It was a young woman, no older than 17, smiling beside a teenage boy in uniform. The girl's face was unmistakable, his mother, Mary. Jake flipped the photo. On the back, scrawled in fading ink, were the words, "Walter and Mary, Summer '75. His hands shook. His mother had never once mentioned a brother. In fact, she'd always said her family was long gone. Jake rifled through the letters, some addressed to Mary and signed with love by Walter. Others were in a child's writing, addressed to Uncle Wally. He sat back against the cold brick wall, stunned. Could this Walter be his uncle? Had his mother hidden an entire family history from him? And why? He looked at Max, who sat beside him patiently, tail flicking. Jake realized the dog hadn't just led him here by chance, he had brought him to something meant to be found. Jake stuffed the box into his backpack and ran back to the park bench, but Walter was gone. The bench was empty, only a few scattered breadcrumbs left behind. Jake turned in every direction, scanning for that familiar green military coat. "Walter," he called out, voice rising in panic. Max barked once and took off again, slower this time, as if he knew Jake would follow. Jake didn't hesitate. The answers he never even knew he was missing were now just a few steps ahead, guided by the dog who somehow knew more than any of them. Max led Jake through a maze of backstreets and alleyways, finally stopping beneath an old bridge where a small camp had been set up, makeshift blankets, a few crates, and a tarp strung overhead. Walter sat there, hunched over a can of beans, startled when Jake approached with the rusted metal box in hand. For a long moment, neither spoke. Jake held up the photo. "This is you and my mother, isn't it?" he asked, voice tight. Walter's eyes dropped to the image, then closed. "I didn't want you to find that," he said quietly. "Didn't think it was my place to tell you." Jake sat down slowly, emotions churning. "She never mentioned you." "Not once." Walter nodded solemnly. "Mary and I were half-siblings. Same mother, different fathers. We were close as kids, real close. But she got adopted by a family that wanted nothing to do with me. Thought I was trouble because I was older, already in the system. I went to war. She went to college. We wrote letters. For a while. But after she married, the letters stopped." His voice cracked, the pain of abandonment still raw beneath the calm exterior. "I never stopped loving her. Never stopped hoping she was okay." Jake's mind raced. The idea that his mother, his image of family, had hidden such a massive piece of her past stunned him. "She told me her family was gone. That no one was left," he whispered. Walter offered a weak smile. "I figured she had her reasons. I kept tabs from a distance when I could. Saw you once, years ago. Little guy at the grocery store. I wanted to say something, but I looked at me, then looked at you, and figured the best thing I could do was walk away." Jake's chest tightened. "You're my uncle." Walter nodded, eyes glistening. "Didn't expect you to care." Max must have known it was time. The golden retriever, lying quietly nearby, thumped his tail at the sound of his name. Jake looked between the man and the dog and realized this wasn't just a coincidence. It was a second chance. "I do care," Jake said firmly. "You're coming with me. We're not ending the story like this." And for the first time, Walter didn't protest. Jake didn't waste time. That very evening, he cleared out the guest room in his apartment, laid out clean clothes, and made sure Max had his own corner with blankets and a bowl of fresh water. Walter stood in the doorway, hesitant, shoulders stiff with the unfamiliar comfort of shelter. "You don't have to do all this," he murmured. But Jake just shook his head. "Your family. This is long overdue." Over the next few weeks, Walter slowly adjusted to indoor life, though he still rose before dawn and sat outside with his coffee and Max. Jake helped him get to the VA office, and with some persistence, Walter finally received the veterans' benefits he had long been denied. The two men, once strangers, began building a quiet bond, over coffee, over stories, and through the silent companionship of the dog who had brought them together. But Jake knew one more piece of the past had to be addressed. With the photograph and letters in hand, he finally visited his mother. When he told her everything, about Walter, about Max, about the box, Mary went silent. Then, trembling, she broke down in tears. "I never stopped loving him," she whispered, voice cracking. "But I was told to forget. My adoptive parents said he was a threat, that he'd ruin my chances at a good life. I was a coward. I let their fear become mine." Jake listened, heart heavy, then gently asked her to come see Walter. She resisted at first, but days later, she stood in Jake's apartment, frozen in the doorway. Walter looked up from the table, stunned. "Mary," he choked out. She rushed to him, collapsing into his arms as decades of silence crumbled between them. They wept like children, clutching each other, forgiven in an instant. That night, the three of them sat around the dinner table, Jake, Walter, and Mary, with Max curled beneath them, content and watchful. The air was filled with laughter, shared memories, and the kind of warmth that only healing could bring. Jake glanced at Max and smiled, realizing that the dog hadn't just led him to a man under a bridge, he had led them all back to the family they thought they'd lost forever.